I came to my Alpha X's engagement rehearsal, knowing I shouldn't. I was 26 and a textile restorer at the Musée des Tissus in Lyon, and the woman whose engagement I had come to watch, knowing exactly how much it would cost me, was the Alpha who had broken my first heat 6 months earlier and left me on a Tuesday morning, with a folded handwritten note and the smell of her cedar and citrus scent still in my sheets. Her name was Aurelia Thorne. She was 30. She was the second daughter of the Thorne family, the old French Alpha line that had run a small private bank out of an Hotel Particulier in the 7th arrondissement of Paris since 1817, and a Loire Valley vineyard estate since the Revolution before that.
Welcome, everyone! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
She was getting married on the first Saturday of October in the chapel of the Château de Thorne in Anjou to Delphine Astor, Alpha 32, banking heiress. The daughter of the family that owned the bank Aurelia's family had been trying to absorb for 40 years. The merger had been engineered at the cradle. Aurelia had been 10 years old at the funeral of Delphine's grandmother when their two mothers had shaken hands over the small white coffin and decided, in 3 sentences, that this would be the marriage that finally pulled the Thorne Bank into the modern century. I had known about Delphine for the entire 4 years Aurelia, and I had been together. I had also been told, in the same number of sentences, that the engagement would never actually happen, that Aurelia would refuse, that Lady Beatrix Thorne, the Alpha matriarch, the grandmother, the actual head of the family, would stand on Aurelia's side, that the bank could go to hell, that no Thorne had ever been forced into a bond, and no Thorne ever would. I had believed Aurelia for 4 years. My name is Saoirse Wynn. I am an Omega. My scent is orange blossom and warm vanilla, with the small green note of fresh paper underneath that the textile restorers all carry. I had spent 4 years being chosen, 2nd, 3rd, sometimes 7th, on a list whose first item I now know was never mine to compete with. Aurelia had been engaged to Delphine Astor on the inside of her body since she was 10. She had simply not told me until my body had let her have a reason. I am about to tell you about the night her older sister walked across a bunch of some 200 guests at the rehearsal in Anjou and took my hand in front of the entire Alpha aristocracy of France. But I have to back up first because the walking across the room is not the part that mattered. The mattering had already happened in a glass corridor at noon, 8 hours before, when Lady Beatrix Thorne, 71 years old, Alpha, 4 feet 11, the only person in the family who scared Aurelia, had taken me into her private library and said the 8 words that decided everything. Cassia is coming home for this. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up further. The Thornes are not the loudest of the old French Alpha families. They are the most disciplined. The other houses, the Astors, the Vergnets, the Bouchards, measure themselves by acquisitions, by buildings on the Champs-Élysées, with their initials cast in brass over the door, by the dynastic photographs in Paris Match. The Thornes measure themselves by what they have refused. They have refused the public board seats. They have refused the magazine covers. They have refused, on 3 occasions in 2 centuries, marriages that would have doubled the bank and would have asked the family to behave like a corporation instead of a pack. The current head of the family is Lady Beatrix Thorne, who took the chair when her husband died in 1996, who is 4 feet 11 inches and weighs 94 pounds, and is the only Alpha in France who can silence a Bouchard with a single sentence at a state dinner. She has 2 granddaughters. The older is Cassia, the younger is Aurelia. The line skips 2 generations because the women in between were not Alphas, and the Thornes have always passed the chair to the eldest Alpha. That is the family. I met Aurelia Thorne when I was 21 at the closing of a small Picasso retrospective at the Musée Marmottan in Paris on a Thursday night in October. I was a junior assistant at the time, 6 months into a 1-year placement, in a borrowed black wool dress and my grandmother's small ivory hairpin. Aurelia was 25. She had been brought by a friend of a friend. She was wearing a sharp charcoal suit with no tie and a thin watch on her left wrist, and her scent, cedar smoke and sharp citrus, The citrus, a young alpha's bright green note that softens to amber by 30, moved through the viewing room before she did. She walked up to me at the small, late Picasso I had spent 6 weeks writing about. She asked me the right question. I answered honestly, the way you answer honestly when your body has decided before your mouth that you are going to be honest with this person for the rest of your life. She set her glass down. I went somewhere else with her 3 nights a week for 4 years, in a small flat in the Croix Rousse that smelled of the wheat paste I cooked on Sundays, and the cedar scent she wore in the evenings, and the warm orange blossom we had agreed, without agreeing, made the room ours. I was born in a small Omega house in East Cork, a stone cottage at the back of a hill above the harbor, owned by my Aunt Awifi, who took me in at 6 when my mother went into a long heat and did not come out of it. My grandmother had bound music for a small chamber publisher in Cork for 50 years. My mother had bound nothing. My mother had been the bright, loud Omega who had wanted to be on stage, and a Dublin Alpha had wanted her to be the Omega who supported him on stage. And the marriage had ended in 2003 in the small civil way Irish Omega marriages of that decade ended. And my mother had come back to Cork, and the heat that took her had taken her in a way that had no exit. And I had been raised by my aunt and my grandmother and the small back room of the bindery in Cork, where the leather and the paper and the wheat paste had taught me the only thing I knew about my own scent before I met Aurelia, which was that orange blossom belonged in a room of warm books. I came to Paris at 19 on a textile conservation scholarship to the École du Louvre. I was meant to go back to Cork at 21. I did not go back. I had met Aurelia. I had stayed. I want to be honest about who I was during those 4 years, because the honest version is the only one that explains the next part. I was the Omega who did not ask. I was the Omega who did not push at Delphine Astor's name in the conversation. I had said, take the time you need to figure it out about Delphine for 4 years. I had said it on Christmas Eve in 2022, when Aurelia's mother had called from Anjou to tell her the Astor merger talks had reopened. I had said it again in March of 2024, when Delphine had been at the same small private dinner at the Bouchard Hotel, and Aurelia had spent the whole evening at the other end of the table, not looking at me. I had been raised to believe that the not asking was the love, that the carrying the silence was what an Omega did for an Alpha she trusted. I was wrong. I was wrong for the entire 4 years. And I am going to be honest about that here, because the easy version of this story is one where Aurelia is the villain and I am the wronged Omega. And the true version is that I had spent 4 years training her to leave by being so easy to leave that she did not have to make a difficult decision. And a different Omega, a louder Omega, a Cassia Thorne kind of Omega. If Cassia had been an Omega, would have made her choose at year 1 and saved both of us 3 more years. She did not choose me. She chose, eventually, the bank. The morning of the 8th of April, my body did the one thing I had been most afraid of. I had not yet had my first heat. Omegas in my family run late. My aunt had been 26 at hers. My mother had been 24. My grandmother had been 27. And I had begun to think, in the small private way I had thought all of my life, that maybe I would be the Omega who did not have one, the Omega without a heat, the Omega so quiet that even her body would never raise its voice. The 8th of April, my body raised its voice, and she did not move toward me. She moved away. She got out of the bed. She put on a robe. She did not finish it. She left. She left me alone in the small flat above the bakery, on the slope of the Croris with my first heat unfolding in my body, and her scent in the sheets and a half-empty glass of water on the bedside table she had drunk from the night before. And Maeve came at 7 and stayed for the 3 days and brought me cold cloths and bowls of broth and held my hand and said nothing, and I said nothing, and we both knew. On the 4th day, Aurelia came back. I had bathed. I was in the kitchen. The orange blossom had quieted to the long, warm undernote that Omegas wear after a first heat for the rest of their lives. I said, "You never chose me, Aurelia. You let me think you were going to." She did not answer that. She nodded once. She went into the bedroom. She packed the rest of her things. She left the cedar in the room, and she left the flat. And she left me at the kitchen counter with a glass of water in my hand that I did not drink. And I sat at the small kitchen table in the smell of the cedar fading and the orange blossom calming, and I cried for 10 minutes, and then I stopped, because Maeve had taught me the only useful thing my aunt had not taught me, which was that an omega who knows when she has been left will save herself the second leaving. Aurelia married Delphine Astor on paper on the 17th of April in a quiet civil ceremony at the mairie of the 7th arrondissement, with 2 witnesses, with a private brunch at the Astor house afterward, with no announcement. The merger of the banks was completed on the 22nd. The engagement, the public family 600-guest engagement at the Château de Thorne in Anjou, the one with the rehearsal weekend and the chapel and the dynastic photograph, was scheduled for the first weekend of October, the harvest weekend, 6 months later. Lady Beatrix had insisted on the separation. The Astors had wanted everything at once. Lady Beatrix had said no, in the small, precise voice she uses when she is going to win without raising it, and the Astors had folded, because nobody folds a thorn. The rehearsal weekend was the last weekend of September. I received the invitation in the 3rd week of August. It came by post on the cream thorn family card with a small embossed brass thread seal in the corner. It was written in Lady Beatrix's own hand. It said, "Saoirse, you will not want to come. You will come anyway. Aurelia will not write to you, because Aurelia is a coward about things she cannot win. I am writing to you because I am not. Cassia is flying in from Hong Kong on the Thursday before. I would like you both in the small library at noon on the Friday. I have something to say to both of you. Lodging arranged. The Loire is beautiful in late September. I read the card 3 times. I put it on the small kitchen table for 2 days. I called Maeve and read it to her. She said 1 sentence, Saoirse. She knows what she's doing. I packed. I took the TGV down to Angers on the Thursday evening of the last week of September, and I got off the train at the small Anjou station at 9 in the evening, and the driver Lady Beatrix had sent was waiting for me on the platform with my name on a small card. He drove me out into the harvest dark, on a road of plane trees lit by the low lamps of the vineyards on either side, and the Château de Thorne came up out of the dark at 20 past 10, a long, pale, honey-stone 17th century manor with 2 short wings and a small chapel at the south end, with the kitchen lights still on and a brass lamp burning over the front door. Mrs. Lavoie, the housekeeper of 41 years, opened the door before I had reached the top step. She had been told to expect me. She did not say anything about Aurelia. She did not say anything about Delphine. She said, "Lady Beatrix has had a long evening. She will see you at breakfast. Your room is the small green one on the 2nd floor, 2nd door on the left after the landing." She paused with her hand on the door, and she added, in the voice she had used for 36 years on the small private things that mattered, "Cassia is in the long library at the end of the east wing." She came in at 6. I did not go to the long library. I went to the small green room on the 2nd floor. I unpacked. I did not sleep. I lay in the iron bed with the small lamp on, and I listened to the Loire wind in the plane trees outside the window, and I thought, for the first time honestly, about Cassia Thorne. I had met Cassia twice in 4 years. Once at a small family dinner in Anjou in the 2nd year, when I had been brought down to be introduced, and Cassia had flown in from Hong Kong for the weekend specifically to meet me, and once at the funeral of an aunt in the 3rd year. She is 34. She is the elder Thorne sister. She is the heir to the chair by Lady Beatrix's decision and by her own merit, because she has spent the 12 years since her own first heat. Cassia's first heat had been at 22, in the middle of a quarterly board meeting at the bank, and she had finished the meeting before going home, running the small private side of the family bank that the Astors have not been allowed near. She is tall. She is dark-haired, pinned up at the nape with a small tortoiseshell comb, with the sharp, clean thorn jaw and the steady gray-green thorn eyes. She wears charcoal suits cut in the close English style by the same Mayfair tailor her father used. Her scent, I am being precise about this because the scent matters, is dark vetiver, warm cognac, and the small, dry leather note of a saddle warmed by a hand. It is the most adult alpha scent I have ever smelled. At the family dinner in the 2nd year, she had crossed the salon to me at 23 to my 22, and she had taken my hand for the introduction, and she had held it for a count of 3 seconds longer than the introduction required. And she had looked at me. Looked at me, not down at me, even though she had 3 inches on me, and she had said only, Saoirse. 2, once, is the way you say a name when you are committing it to memory. She had then released my hand, turned to Aurelia, who had been across the salon watching, and she had said one sentence to her sister that I had not understood until the 8th of April. Take care, Aurelia. Aurelia had laughed it off. I had laughed it off. Cassia had not laughed. Cassia had gone to the window and stood with her back to the room for 10 minutes. We had not spoken again that weekend. I had not let myself remember the sentence for 4 years. I remembered it at 11:30 that night, in the iron bed at the small green room, with the Loire wind in the plane trees, and I understood, with the kind of slow, certain understanding the body sometimes gives you long after the mind has decided to refuse it, that Lady Beatrix's 8-word invitation, Cassia is coming home for this, had not been an invitation to a wedding rehearsal. It had been an invitation to the room where my actual life would either begin or not begin. I slept 3 hours. I dreamed of cedar and dark vetiver, mixing and could not tell, in the dream, which one I was choosing toward. Lady Beatrix Thorne came down to breakfast at 8 in a soft gray wool dress, and the small string of South Sea pearls she has worn at every breakfast since 1976. She kissed me on both cheeks. She did not mention Aurelia, who was in Paris until the late train Friday. She did not mention Delphine, who was at the Astor house in Tours and would come on the Saturday morning. She poured me coffee with milk in it from a tiny silver jug, and she pushed a small plate of pain au chocolat across the kitchen table the way you push a thing toward the next person, and she said with her eyes on her own cup, "You came." Good, I was 80% sure. I am almost never 80% sure. Cassia is in the small library at noon. You will be there with me. We will be 3. We are going to have a short conversation that I have been waiting 4 years to have, and I am going to be the one to start it. It's because Cassia will not start it on her own, and you should not have to start it at all. And I have decided, with the part of me that is 71, that the time is now. I ate my pain au chocolat. The small library at the Château de Thorne is the warm front room of the East Wing, 2 tall windows over the rose garden, a marble fireplace with a portrait of Lady Beatrix's mother over it, 2 deep green leather armchairs, a low writing table, a tall book wall, and the small smell of old paper and beeswax and cold roses that the great old French houses have and the new ones cannot buy. I went in at 5 to 12. Lady Beatrix was already in the green chair on the left, with her grandmother's small jet rosary in her right hand. Cassia was at the tall window with her back to the room. She turned at the small sound of the door. She crossed the room in 3 steps. She stopped 1 step in front of me. She had on a charcoal wool jacket over a soft cream silk shirt, sleeves turned once at the wrist, the thin watch on her left wrist, no jewelry except the gold signet ring of the Thorne family on the smallest finger of her right hand. The dark vetiver moved into the small space between us, and underneath it the warm cognac, and underneath that the small dry leather, and my orange blossom and vanilla rose to meet it before I had decided whether to let it. In the way an omega's scent rises when an alpha she has been thinking about for one night, and 4 years stops 1 step in front of her. Cassia did not say my name yet. She set her right hand on the back of the green leather chair beside us, lightly, not to touch me, to give my body a second to settle in the room. And she looked at Lady Beatrix and she said, in the low, even voice the family bank's competitors say they cannot read, "Grand-mère." "Will you say it?" Lady Beatrix said with her eyes still on her cup. "I will say it." We sat, Cassie in the chair on the right, me on the small footstool at the side of Lady Beatrix's chair because Lady Beatrix put her hand on my shoulder and pressed me down onto it the way she had been pressing women onto stools since 1962. She kept her hand on my shoulder. She turned the cup on its saucer once. She looked at Cassia. She looked at me. She said, "Aurelia is marrying Delphine on Saturday for the bank. I have agreed to it because we will lose the bank if she does not." The bank is 640 employees and the pensions of 2,400 people, and my grandfather's promise to my grandmother in 1922 that no family of mine would ever be broken by a Bouchard, and we will lose it to a Bouchard within 4 years if we do not lock the Astor merger before Christmas. So Aurelia is marrying Delphine. She would have been marrying Delphine within 12 months, no matter who she had been sleeping with, because that has been her job since she was 10, and I let her pretend otherwise for 4 years because I was hoping she would choose you anyway. She chose the easier thing instead. She is now my second granddaughter, and she will be my second granddaughter for the rest of my life. And she will run the Lyon office until she dies, and the chair will pass to Cassia when I die, which is the part Aurelia has never had the courage to admit she always preferred. The other thing, and this is the thing I'm going to say to you, Saoirse, because Cassia will not say it, and I am too old to wait, is that Cassia has been in love with you since the family dinner in the second year of you and Aurelia, when she crossed the room to meet you, and she went back to Hong Kong on the Sunday and stayed there for 4 years because she would not be the alpha who took her sister's omega, even when she could see, as the entire family could see, that her sister had not taken you in any real sense and was not going to. She has stayed away. She has not written to you. She has not asked after you. She has watched from Hong Kong, while Aurelia let you go in the slow, stupid way Aurelia lets things go. And she has waited, and she has not moved because she has the carefulness Aurelia does not have. She is here now because I have called her home. I will ask you one question, Saoirse. You will answer it now, in this room, with both of us hearing the answer, because the time for the careful version of this conversation has run out, and Cassia is not going to ask, and I am not going to let either of you walk out of this room before it is asked. I want to tell you what I did with my hands while Lady Beatrix spoke. I set my hands in my lap. I did not look at Cassia. I looked at the rosary in Lady Beatrix's right hand. I let my body do the thing my body had been trying to do since the corridor at noon, which was to set the orange blossom into the room without my having to argue with it. I let it. Cassia's vetiver answered it. The room held both scents at once, for a count of 10 in which nobody spoke. I understood, listening to my own scent settle against the vetiver, that I had spent 4 years training my scent to soften itself around cedar that did not want it, and that I had not had to teach it anything to be in this room. It knew where it belonged, in the way an Omega's body, when finally given a room with an honest alpha in it, always knows. I looked up. I looked at Cassia for the first time since she had crossed the room. She was looking at me. She had not interrupted Lady Beatrix once. Her right hand was on the arm of the chair, the gold signet ring catching the noon light, and her face was the face of a woman who had decided, 12 years ago, at 22 on the floor of a board meeting, that she would never make another person carry her decisions for her. She was waiting. Lady Beatrix lifted her hand from my shoulder. She set her cup down. The faint small click of the saucer was the loudest sound in the room. She said to Cassia, "Then you will stay. The rehearsal is on Friday at 6. The wedding is on Saturday at noon. You will sit beside Saoirse at the rehearsal dinner. You will not pretend to be anything other than what you are. You will not be cruel to Aurelia, but you will not protect her from the fact that this is happening. You will let the room see. I have been the head of this house for 29 years, and the only thing I have ever regretted is the things I let happen quietly when I should have made them loud. This will not be one of those." Lady Beatrix said, "Good, go to lunch, sit together. Cassia, your sister will be on the late train. You will be in the library when she arrives. You will tell her, before she goes upstairs, that Saoirse is at the rehearsal as your guest and not the family's. You will say it in front of her mother. I will be there. Saoirse, eat. You are too thin. You have been running on the smell of an empty kitchen for 6 months. We will fix that this weekend." We went. I will tell you what we did between the small library at noon and the rehearsal dinner at 6, because the 8 hours between were the careful long shape of 2 adult alphas in a house full of witnesses, and they decided more than the dinner did. Cassia walked me back through the long west corridor to the breakfast room. She did not touch me. She walked at the careful, slow pace of an alpha who knows an omega is sorting her own scent and does not want to crowd the work. At the breakfast room door, she stopped. She said, "Saoirse." She said, "The first thing is that I am not going to ask you to bond with me this weekend. I am not going to ask you to bond with me next week either. I have waited 4 years for you to walk into a room and choose. I can wait a season for you to walk through one. We are going to do this the way I do everything, which is at the speed of the slowest piece of it. You set the speed. The second thing is that there will be a moment tonight at the rehearsal when I am going to do something in front of the family and the Astors and the 200 guests that I have asked Grand-mère to be ready for and that I have not asked you to be ready for, because I want you to feel it the way the room feels it. I am telling you it is coming because I will not surprise an omega in a room full of alphas. When it happens, you do not have to respond. You may stand still, you may leave. You may say no with your face if you want to. Whatever you do, I will hold to it. But I am telling you now that I am going to do it so that you know before that the choice tonight is yours and not mine." She said, "Good, eat something." She went down the corridor toward the long library. I went into the breakfast room. Mrs. Lavoie had laid out cold roast pheasant and dark bread and a small bowl of the late September figs from the south wall of the kitchen garden. I ate slowly. I drank a glass of cold water. I thought about Cassia's 2 sentences, "You set the speed." I will keep up, but... Understood, sitting alone at the breakfast room table in the warm afternoon Loire light, that I had never in my life been in a room with an alpha who had said that to me out loud. I want to tell you about the rehearsal at 6, because the rehearsal is the public part of this story, and the part the title of this video promises. The rehearsal at the Château de Thorne is held in the long ballroom on the ground floor. A 100-foot room with 3 marble chimney pieces, 6 tall windows over the south terrace and the vineyard beyond, a parquet floor laid in 1812 that has been polished by 3 centuries of dancing, and an old gilt rococo gallery at the west end where the small orchestra plays. 200 guests had come down for the weekend. The Astors had come in from tours at 4. Aurelia had arrived on the late afternoon train at 5. Lady Beatrix had told the news in the long library at 5:15, in front of her mother, exactly as she had promised, and Aurelia had gone up to her room and not come down again until 10 to 6, in a soft champagne silk dress and the cold, sharp cedar and citrus that meant she was furious and would not show it. Delphine Astor had come down at 6 exactly in a sharp black gown, ice rose scent, banking heiress composure. The 200 guests stood in the long ballroom in small clusters, with champagne and shallow flutes, in the low, warm pre-dinner buzz of an old family rehearsal. The orchestra was tuning. The candles on the chimney pieces had been lit. The first speeches were 10 minutes away. I stood at the south wall under the 3rd chimney piece, in a dark green silk dress my grandmother had left me, the small ivory hairpin in my hair, my orange blossom and vanilla scent settled at the warm undernote of a 6-month after first heat omega who had decided, finally, to stop apologizing for it. Lady Beatrix was at the rococo end of the room with the Astor matriarch. Aurelia was at the center with Delphine, on the small raised platform where the speeches would be given, accepting greetings. Cassia was nowhere I could see. I was talking to Mrs. Lavoie, who had come to the wall to check on me, because Mrs. Lavoie had been informed by the kitchen staff that the small omega in the green dress had not eaten enough. When the room went quiet by a ½ degree, the way a room goes quiet when an alpha has entered a doorway behind it. I did not turn. Mrs. Lavoie did. Her mouth did the small thing it did when she was pleased and did not want to show it. She said, into my ear, "She is at the east doors. She is going to walk down the room. Stand straight." I stood straight. I did not move. Cassia Thorne walked the length of the long ballroom at the Château de Thorne, in front of 200 witnesses, in the slow, steady stride of a woman who had walked a great many rooms in her career, and had decided, on this one, that she would not waste a single one of the 100 feet. She had on a black tuxedo cut close, no shirt collar visible, no tie, the gold signet ring on her right hand catching the light at every 3rd step. The dark vetiver and warm cognac and dry leather moved with her. The room turned toward her in the small, slow, inevitable way a room turns toward an heir. Aurelia turned on the platform. Delphine turned. Lady Beatrix turned, and her face did the small thing it had done at Lady Beatrix's wedding portrait, a faint, precise softening at the corner of her mouth. Cassia crossed the parquet at the slow, careful step. She did not look at Aurelia. She did not look at Delphine. She did not look at Lady Beatrix. She looked at me. She did not break the look for the entire walk. The room understood what was happening by the third chimney piece. Aurelia understood by the cessets. I understood that Cassia had spent 12 years learning to walk rooms and had decided to spend the longest, slowest, most unmistakable walk of her career on the 100 feet between an east doorway and a small omega in a dark green dress under a chimney piece. She stopped one step in front of me. She did not lift her hand at first. The room held its breath. She said, in a low, even voice that did not announce itself, but that the entire 200-guest ballroom heard, Saoirse Wynn. I am Cassia Thorne. I am the elder Thorne sister, and I will be the head of this house when my grandmother lets me. And I have come back from Hong Kong because I love you, and I have loved you since the second year, and I should have stayed and not gone, and I am not going to be the alpha who is too careful again. I am asking you here in front of the family and the Astors and the 200 people who came to watch my sisters marry her bank to let me sit with you at this dinner, to walk with you tomorrow at the wedding, to stay with you in this house for the autumn, and at the end of the autumn, only at the end, only if you are ready, only if your body and your mind and the slowness of your own deciding tell you yes, to let me bond you. I am not asking you to answer yes tonight. I am asking you to let me sit beside you at the dinner. The rest of it, you decide. I want to tell you what I did with my hands. I lifted my right hand from where it had been at my side, and I held it palm up in the small space between us, the way an omega offers her wrist to an alpha she has decided about, and I said, in a voice that the entire room heard, with my orange blossom warm and steady, and not at all apologetic in the air, "Yes, Cassia." She took my hand. She did not lift it dramatically. She set the back of her own hand under mine, the way you support a thing that has decided to choose you, and she walked me, slowly in front of the whole room, to the table at the front and to the chair beside her own at the head of the family side, two seats down from Lady Beatrix and directly across the long table from Aurelia and Delphine. Aurelia's cedar went sharp at the corner of the platform. Delphine's ice rose did not move. Delphine is the one of the four of us in that ballroom who never lost her composure. Lady Beatrix sat down with the small, precise nod she gives at the end of a board meeting she has won. The orchestra began to play. Mrs. Lavoie, behind me at the wall, was crying quietly into her apron, in the small private way she had cried for Lady Beatrix in 1976. Cassia poured me water. She turned the cup toward me. She sat down. She did not look at her sister. She said, against my ear, in the low voice she used for me from then on, "Eat what you can. You don't have to talk to her tonight. I will handle her." I drank the water. I will tell you the shape of the 3 weeks, because the rehearsal night was only the door, and the autumn between September and the end of October was the careful long shape of what we built behind it. The wedding happened the next day at noon as scheduled. Aurelia married Delphine in the chapel of the Château de Thorne. The bank merger was announced on the Monday. Aurelia and Delphine went to the Astor estate near Tours for a short honeymoon week, and then back to Paris to the small apartment Delphine kept on the Avenue Foch. The Astors got their merger. The Thornes kept the chair. The pensions were safe. Lady Beatrix had won the only thing she had ever needed to win, which was the family. I stayed at the Château de Thorne. I stayed because Cassia had asked me to, in the small library at noon on the Friday, in the form of the only question she had ever asked me. And because Lady Beatrix had said on the Sunday morning at breakfast that I was to consider the small green room, on the second floor my room, until the end of October, when Cassia and I were to have what Lady Beatrix called the second conversation, the one we would have at the end of the autumn instead of at the beginning. I stayed because I had a sabbatical I had not used in 3 years, because the museum had given me the autumn off the moment I had asked, because Maeve had said, "Saoirse, stay there. Do not come back to that flat yet. The cedar will still be in the walls." And because my own body told me, in the small, steady way an omega's body tells her, that the dark vetiver of the Château de Thorne was a smell I had not yet finished arriving inside. Cassia stayed too. Her work allowed it. Most of the bank's business is done by encrypted call, and she had set up a small office in the East Wing. And she had not been to the Loire for more than 10 days at a time in 12 years, and Lady Beatrix had given her the autumn the way Lady Beatrix gave anyone anything, which is by deciding and not asking. So we stayed. There were 5 of us in this house: Lady Beatrix, Cassia Mrs. Lavoie, and the cook Bernard, who had been at the chateau since 1989, and the small careful shape of an autumn at a French country house held us. I will give it to you in the small things, because the small things were the bond. Cassia did not touch me for the first 9 days. I want to be exact about this, because it is the part people who do not know alphas misunderstand. She did not avoid touching me. She did not stand stiffly across rooms. She walked with me. She sat near me at meals. She stood beside me at the long windows of the East Library at 6 in the evening, when the vineyard light moved across the parquet. She put her hand on the small of my back once at the door of the small chapel, when we walked out together on the second Sunday, lightly, the way you steady a thing you are not going to hold up. She did not kiss me. She did not take my wrist. She did not lean down at the corner of my mouth. She gave my body the 9 days she had decided my body needed, because the only thing she had asked me in the small library was that I set the speed, and she had decided, without my having to say it, that 9 days was the minimum an omega 6 months past a brutal first heat, and 1 day past a public claim deserved before being asked anything else. I learned her scent in the 9 days the way you learn a long piece of music, the vetiver lead with the dry leather under it. The cognac came forward when she had had a difficult call from the Hong Kong office. The small new note, the one that surprised me, was a clean, cold, dry note like winter river stone that came up only late at night after 11, when she stopped working and the day had unwound from her, and she sat in the green chair across the small fire from me and read. She read in French and in English and once a week in Mandarin, with the gold signet ring on her right hand catching the lamplight, with her sleeves turned once at the wrist, and at the end of the first week I added something to a small notebook I had been keeping at the writing desk in the small green room, which was the first list I had ever kept about an alpha for the right reason. She turned the cup handle toward me. She had always done it. I noticed it on the second day. She set every glass and every plate she pushed across a table so the handle or the better edge faced me first. She had been doing it in the family salon when Aurelia had been in the room 4 years before, and I had not noticed because Aurelia had not done it back. Cassia did it without theater, without watching whether I noticed, the way you set down a thing for the next person because you have been raised to set down things for the next person. She did not eat first. At dinner, Mrs. Lavoie served us in the small dining room off the kitchen, because the big dining room was too cold in late September, and Lady Beatrix had said, "Eat where it is warm. The formality can come back when there are guests." Cassia waited until I had picked up my fork before she picked up hers. She did not say anything about it. She did not pretend to be reading the menu card or rearranging the napkin. She simply waited. On the first night I noticed. On the second night I started, because she would not start until I did, and we both ate. On the third night Lady Beatrix said, looking at her own plate without looking up, "Cassia, you have been doing that since you were 22. Your grandfather did it for me for 58 years. Saoirse, you should know it is a Thorne habit. The alphas in this family eat second. We have not always had alphas worthy of the habit, but the habit is the habit." I drank my water. Cassia looked at her grandmother with the small private gratitude an alpha gives another alpha who has named a thing she did not want to name herself, and the small evening went on. Aurelia called the house on the 10th day. I want to tell you about that call, because the call was the last thing Aurelia did to me as my ex, and the first thing she did to me as Cass's sister, and the call was the one piece of the autumn I had been afraid of for the whole 6 months, and that turned out not to be the thing it had been pretending to be. She did not call my mobile. She called the house line at the Chateau de Thorne at 6:15 on a Tuesday evening, and Mrs. Lavoie answered, and Mrs. Lavoie came to the library doorway and said in the small, precise voice that meant trouble, "Saoirse." I went to the small phone in the corridor. Cassia did not follow me. She did not stand near. She did the thing she did, which was to stay in the library with the door open by an inch, and let me have the corridor and the call and my own answer to it. I picked up the receiver. She said, Saoirse. She said, then I will be brief, because Cassia can hear the corridor from the library, and I am not going to make her be polite about it. I left you in April because I had known, since it's the second-year dinner, that the Omega Cassia was going to come back from Hong Kong for the day she finally chose to come back was you. I had not been chosen by anybody ever in this family. Not by our mother, not by grand-mère, not by the bank, not by Delphine. And I let myself spend 4 years pretending the one person who had chosen me to was you would be enough to balance the people who had not. I was wrong. I let you go because I knew Cassia would come eventually. I did not let you go because I had stopped wanting you. I do not want you to hear from anyone other than me ever that I did not stop wanting you. I want you to hear it from me now in this corridor, before you bond with my sister, because if you bond with her not knowing it, I will have done one more careful cowardly thing to you, and I would like to stop doing those. That is all. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am telling you the truth so that the truth is in the corridor and not in your scent. The next time my sister puts her hand on your throat. Goodbye, Saoirse. Take care of Cassia. And she hung up. I stood in the corridor with the receiver in my hand for a long count. I did not cry. I set the receiver in the cradle. I went back to the library. Cassia was in the green chair. She had not pretended to be reading. She had her hands folded in her lap. She looked at me. I said yes. She did not ask what. She opened the book on her lap and started reading the next page where we had left off. And she let the corridor be the corridor and the library be the library. And she did not crowd the space my body had used to put down the last thing it had been carrying. I sat down across from her. I listened to her read for 9 minutes. At the end of the chapter, I said, Cassia. She moved. She did not touch me. She sat next to me with the side of her thigh against the side of mine, and we read the rest of the chapter that way, and that was the 10th night of the autumn. She read aloud to me in the second week. She had not asked. I had been in the library at 8 with the small French novel my mother had sent me from Cork, and she had come in with the day's papers, and she had said only, "What are you reading?" "Tea," and I had told her, and she had said, "Will you read it to me?" I have not had a person read to me in 15 years. T and I had said yes, and I had read her the first chapter, and then the second. And at the end of the second chapter, she had said, "Saoirse, will you let me read the third to you?" T and I had said yes. And she had read the third chapter to me in the same low, even voice she used at the breakfast table and at the head of the bank's quarterly meetings. And I had understood, listening to her, that an alpha who had learned to read aloud at the bedside of a dying grandfather at 20 had a voice that an omega could put down as a kind of bed and rest in for as long as the alpha was willing to keep reading. She read the third chapter to me on a Tuesday night. We read together alternating chapters in the green leather chairs by the small library fire, in the warm autumn lamplight, every evening from the 11th day to the day of the second conversation. I will tell you the small things in a single careful paragraph because the small things are the shape of the bond. And the bond is what the title of this video promised at the rehearsal, but the bond was built by the small things. Cassia closed the door behind her without sound. She did not interrupt Mrs. Lavoie in the kitchen because Mrs. Lavoie had run the kitchen for 41 years, and any interruption was an insult Cassia did not give. She wore the gold signet ring of the family on her right hand at all times, even in the bath, because her grandfather had given it to her in his last week, and she had not taken it off in 12 years. She did not raise her voice on a single call to Hong Kong, including the one in the third week when the bank's general counsel told her at 4 a.m. that an Astor cousin had attempted a small unsanctioned acquisition. Cassia listened, asked 3 short questions, said, "Thank you, Henri, we will address it Monday." T hung up and went back to bed. She kept her own scent off my room. She did not pass the door of the small green room in the corridor in the evenings, even when it would have been the shorter way to her own. She went the long way around the east stair, Because an alpha who has decided to give an omega the speed of the omega's own deciding does not crowd the corridor at night. She put her hand at the small of my back at the door of the chapel a second time on the third Sunday, the same way as before, when we walked out together after the small mass that Lady Beatrix had misses. Lavoie organized on the first Sunday of each month for the household. She watched the vineyard with me on the 14th day from the south terrace at the long blue dusk, with a glass of the family rosé in each of our hands, and she told me, without my asking, the small private story I had not heard from anybody else of the day at 22. When she had gone into her first heat in the middle of the bank board meeting and had finished the meeting before going home. She had not finished the meeting because she had been afraid, she said, of what people would think. She had finished it because her grandfather, who had been in the chair beside her, had set his hand on her hand under the table and had said, "Little one, sit through this. It will teach you who is alpha and who is afraid of you." And she had sat through the meeting, and the 4 alphas at the table, who had assumed they would inherit, had not looked at her the same way afterward. And her grandfather had given her the ring at the end of the meeting and told her she would have the chair. And he had died 11 days later. She told me the story without breaking eye contact with the vineyard. She did not need me to say anything. I set my hand on the back of hers on the stone of the balustrade. She turned her hand over and laced her fingers through mine without looking down. We watched the rosé light go to lavender to deep blue without speaking. That was the 14th day. I said, "Yes," she said, "because you have been carrying it under your scent since the second-year dinner." I did not know what it was until now. I am glad to have learned the smell of your grandmother. I did not cry in the kitchen. I cooked the paste a little longer than my grandmother would have. I let the kitchen fill with it. Cassia stayed in the doorway for the whole 20 minutes, with her shoulder against the doorframe, and Bernard moved around her quietly and pretended not to notice and brought us coffee at the end, and set the cups down with the handles turned out. And on the 17th day, in the long library at 9 in the evening, in the warm autumn lamplight, in the middle of a chapter of the small French novel my mother had sent, Cassia stopped reading at the end of a paragraph and set the book down on the arm of her chair and said, in the same low, even voice, "Saoirse, I want to tell you what I did with my hands." I set the book I had been waiting to read aloud next on the small table between us. I stood up. I crossed the 3 steps between our chairs. I sat down on the arm of her chair, the way you sit on the arm of a chair when you have decided you are not going to wait for the chair across from you anymore. I did not touch her face. I set my right hand on hers on the arm of the chair with the gold signet ring under my palm, and I said, "Cassia, I knew the moment you stopped 1 step in front of me in the small library. I knew before that, if I am being honest, in the small flat over the bakery in Lyon at 4 in the morning on the 8th of April, when my body let me know I had been trying to be the omega of an alpha, who had been trying to belong to a different family for 10 years. I knew at the second-year family dinner when you said the sentence I did not let myself remember for 4 years. I knew at the small library on the Friday. I knew at the chimney piece at the rehearsal. I have known. I am ready. I am asking you here on this Tuesday evening in the 17th day of the autumn to bond me. Now. Not at the end of October. Cassia did not move for a count of 4. She closed her hand under mine on the signet ring. I said, "Cassia." She said, in the voice that had cracked in the small library a third of a second on the word love, and had not cracked since, "Then I will go and tell Grand-mère, because we will not do this without telling her, and I will come back to your room at midnight, and we will bond. Stay here." She got up. She went out. She crossed the long corridor to Lady Beatrix's morning sitting room. She was gone for 11 minutes. I sat in the long library by the small fire with the book in my lap, and I felt my orange blossom rise warm and ready in the room for the first time since the 8th of April. And I understood the small thing I had been carrying for 6 months and had not been able to put down, which was that the omega in my family had finally been chosen first. Cassia came back at 9:12. She did not sit down. She held her hand out. She said, "Grand-mère says yes, and that the autumn was for both of us to be careful, and we have been careful enough, and that Bernard has been told to bring breakfast up in the morning and not to knock." I went. I will not tell you about the bond. The bond is between Cassia and me and the small green room and the warm autumn lamplight at the Château de Thorne, and the only true thing I can tell you about it is that an alpha who had spent 12 years not crowding a corridor at night was the most careful person who has ever put her hand at the back of an omega's neck, and that the bond mark is in the small soft place at the back of my left shoulder where the warm vanilla undernote of my scent rises strongest, and that Cassia bit it with the small precision of a woman who had been told once by her own grandmother that an alpha does not leave a mark she is not prepared to read every day for the rest of her life, and that she has read it every day since. We slept against each other for the rest of the night. The dark vetiver and the orange blossom mixed and held in the small green room. The autumn went on. Mrs. Lavoie brought breakfast up at 9 and set it on the small writing desk without knocking, the way Lady Beatrix had told her, and she went out, and we ate it in the bed. Lady Beatrix gave us the long library the next afternoon. She came in at 3. She had with her the small Thorne family ledger that lists every bond in the family back to 1817. She closed the ledger. She set her hand on Cassia's face for one count of 3. She set her hand on mine. She went out. We did not announce the bond. The Astors had had their wedding. The Thornes did not need another piece of the autumn. Aurelia found out 2 weeks later by a letter Cassia wrote her in the same low, careful voice. Aurelia did not reply for 9 days, and then she wrote one line back. "I am glad it is you, Cassia." She nodded once. She went back to her Astor table. We have been polite with her every Christmas since. Lady Beatrix died in February, in her own bed, in the small room at the end of the east wing, with Cassia holding her right hand and me holding her left, and Mrs. Lavoie at the foot of the bed and Bernard in the doorway. She was 71 years old. She had been the head of the family for 29 years. She left the chair to Cassia, who had been ready for the chair since she was 22. She left me one thing in her own handwriting, in a sealed envelope I opened the morning after. That says only, "Saoirse, you are the Omega who walked into my house 6 years ago at 20, and let my house finish arriving around her without trying to be anything more than what she was, and you have done the same for the woman who runs it now. Stay in the small green room, make Cassia eat. The chair is heavy." I have kept the note in the small writing desk in the green room with the small Thorne ledger and my grandmother's bone folder. I am the conservator of the family's textile collection now. The small private museum at the south end of the long ballroom, the 3 centuries of bridal silks and ceremonial linens, and the small framed wedding shawl Lady Beatrix's mother wore in 1924, and I work 3 days a week in the Loire and 2 days a week at the Musée des Tissus in Lyon, where my colleagues have not stopped quietly teasing me about the gold signet ring beside the small bound spine on my left ring finger. I am the Omega of the head of the Thorne house. I am 27. I have spent 1 autumn and 1 winter and 1 spring and 1 summer at the Château de Thorne, and the orange blossom in my scent has not had to apologize once. Aurelia and Delphine come down twice a year, at Christmas and at the harvest. They are polite. We are polite. Aurelia and Cassia have begun to take a walk together on the Sunday morning of every Christmas in this long yew avenue at the back of the property. I do not ask what they say. Delphine and I have made our small, careful peace at the kitchen table. She comes into the kitchen on the Christmas morning at 7, before the others are down, and she sits with me while I make the coffee, and we do not pretend. The bank merger held. The pensions are safe. The Astors got what they wanted. The Thornes kept what they had. It is October at the Château de Thorne again now. The vineyard light is on the parquet of the long ballroom at 6 in the evening. The small green room on the 2nd floor is the room Cassia and I sleep in when we are at the Loire. The long library is the room we read in. The small writing desk under the window is where I have kept the small Thorne ledger since Lady Beatrix died in February, because the head of the family keeps the ledger, and Cassia is the head of the family now, and I am the Omega of the head of the family, and the ledger lives with us. Cassia comes in from the office at 6. She has the gold signet ring on her right hand. She crosses the long library to me at the window. She sets the back of her hand at the side of my jaw, the way she has done for 12 months, and she says, in the low, even voice, "Saoirse." And I do.